So today we're going to talk to Karl Steger, who is the Vice President of our Administrative Services Department. Karl's going to talk to us about his division and its role at the college. Tell me a little bit about your division and kind of, because your division in particular is very multifaceted. So if you could walk us through just kind of the basics of the division that you kind of oversee.
I'm over kind of the business operations and administrative operations. So it's called Administrative Services. I started my career in the business office, so I'm over the business office. I'm over bookstore, over purchasing, and ACC's had a purchasing department, which I helped to start up here since 2016. We had the infancy of it starting in 2013 with just a buyer position, and then we added positions to make it a full department. I'm over physical plant and all the departments that are under that. There's about 5 departments within the physical plant department. And then just this past year, I had police department put under me as well, and kind of a forgotten department is the mailroom is under me as well, which is not only just mail but also answering the phone. So
Switchboard. Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, and I say this basically, but your department handles a lot of the financial transactions that kind of come in and out of the college. One of y'all's biggest responsibilities is the budget, which got approved back here in September, I think it was.
Yeah. Ultimately, yeah.
How much work goes into building your budget? Like, how does it?
It's a lot.
It's a ongoing process. It never really ends.
Practically, yeah. Probably in other institutions that are even larger, it probably goes longer. Probably the one reprieve time period that we get is in the fall, a little bit after we adopted the tax rate in September. I think we adopted the budget in August. Once you adopt the budget in August, you pretty much know what the tax rate is that you're going to adopt in September, and you have to adopt it in September. You have to get those numbers in by the end of September to the county. So we have October through December mainly off, and so January right now we're starting the cycle. Nothing's happening with anybody except for one person. That's my administrative assistant, who is working on accumulating previous numbers to show people so that they can use those numbers to base what they think their new number will be for this coming fiscal year. And so we go through trainings. After we do trainings of how to input your budget, then we're going to go through a process of how to ask for new positions. Under DocStar Exley, there's a little bit of a new philosophy of if we have positions that are open, do we need them? He kind of leaves it to each vice president to kind of use their own and the the people that work under that vice president to figure out how do you want to what is it that you want to do and how can you get there, and is there a way that you can just use some of the resources you have and convert those over and still accomplish what you need to do with new positions. That's what I did some this last year with my area.
Well, and that's part of the whole being fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
I guess it's not just an automatic.
Yeah, makes it a little bit easier this past year just because some positions are difficult to fill.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for instance, it's difficult to fill a part-time custodian position, but it's pretty easy to fill a full-time. So we converted some part-time positions into full-time so that we can just get the staffing we need. We still need to fill that one particular position, but that is the kind of thing that helps.
So it's
you
a whole
adjust
initiative.
to the
it's a whole issue of changing the position to fit the
adjust to the market. Sometimes.
The market needs.
Yeah.
So kind of, has that really gotten difficult? Because you hear a lot of talk about working conditions out there, that a lot of workers are quitting their jobs and moving on, and that it's hard to kind of fill positions in general.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you've encountered, you think, and I guess my point is some of this adjustment, is it part of that?
Some of it. When we have an area of concern, we'll have that area be analyzed by human resources, and they'll do a study. Sometimes the area might even bring some resources of information and say, hey, look at this is what I'm competing against.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we got to make a decision because it depends on how critical the position is or positions. It could be a whole department at times because we are competing against, could be school districts. We have common employees with school districts, could be other colleges, universities. Sometimes some of our employees we're competing with cities and counties too. And so we have to look around and see what is what is it that we need to do sometime to make a strategic move and not lose. You don't want to lose like your core force of employees,
Right. Okay, so in the last board meeting here, last week actually, when we record this, they came out with the audit, and everybody, they hear the word audit, and their eyes glaze over, and but this is pretty important, especially for like government agencies and educational agencies. First of all, I mean, generally speaking, how do we do in the audit in general, but in kind of what does it do for the college to have this done every year?
Well, it has to be done. It's a legal state mandate. Some colleges around the United States, they are audited by their own, like, state auditor, for instance. The way Texas does it is you have to hire an external independent audit accounting firm. And so it has to be done every year. And things have changed since, I don't know if people remember, 2001 Enron collapsed.
Arthur Andersen.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were, Arthur Andersen may be the largest CPA firm in the world at that time, and now they're totally gone.
I was about to say, I don't think they exist anymore.
And so you have, they made a new federal law, Sarbanes-Oxley, and it has really changed how auditing is done. It puts a whole lot more pressure on the individual institution, and it puts a whole lot of pressure on the CFO, puts a whole lot of pressure on the controller of that company or
organization,
institution like we are, a governmental institution. And so they attest to that the financials fairly present the financial situation or status of the college. That's mainly what they're doing. And there is still a lot more of auditing that could occur that really doesn't occur in a financial audit like you'd think. You think they'd go out and do they really test for internal controls everywhere? They don't totally always do that. They can do that if they think there's an area of concern. But if there isn't an area of concern, they don't just go out and strive to look for places. So auditing is, to me, quite a bit different than it was in, more than 20 years ago.
And what was our audit results? I mean, what did they?
It's called an unmodified opinion.
It doesn't sound very
no.
appealing, but it's actually pretty important.
No, and in the accounting world, previously the word they used for the equivalent of that used to be called an unqualified opinion. That means they didn't put any qualifiers on it. Now they call it unmodified. Maybe that sounds a little bit more acceptable to someone that doesn't know much about accounting, but it's a good opinion. The other part that they talk about with the management of the institution and the board is, are there any areas of concern that we should be aware of? There sometimes can be internal controls that I was talking about, or sometimes it can be something else. And so the only thing we had in this audit was really about new accounting standards for accounting for subscriptions for large software purchases and how you do the accounting treatment. And they basically want us to account for that pretty much the same way we do for leases. And I know that sounds probably very boring to the people out there, but it's
that can add up fast. And that's one of those things. Because I know one thing that everybody does understand is, a government agency being fiscally responsible.
And
that's the importance of doing those audits on the annual basis. Like
the multiple years of dollars that we have to pay for those softwares that run our student system, that run our payment system, that run our analysis of our, how we keep up to date with real-time registrations of students to know how are we doing well, are we not doing well, our system of reserving our rooms. There's all these different softwares that we buy, and it adds up to a lot of money, and you have that expense every year.
And this gets complicated too, but it's also one of those things that's very important, especially given, there's a lot of prognostication about the economy coming up that we're about to enter some kind of difficult times. But, after the audit, the Board of Regents approved a transfer of funding that we had. I think it's what's called institutional reserve. Explain what that is and kind of how important that is.
Yeah, so basically when you just a regular company or even
maybe you can explain it in personal savings terms.
We'll talk about revenues and expenses, and so basically we have revenues, we have expenses, and if the revenues, the money in, exceeds the money coming out, then in a governmental institution like us, that's called fund balance, and so it goes into a fund balance. if the board wants to reserve it for a specific or maybe a purpose in the future, then we here at this college, our terminology that we use is we call it institutional reserve. So we reserve that money for possibly a future purpose. And it probably at our level, it's probably the closest thing when you hear to the Texas Rainy Day Fund. Yeah, that there's a fund of money out there that if the crisis got bad enough for us, we try to maintain, it's a very conservative standard. We try to maintain 5 months worth of operations, and this will allow us to. We've just exceeded that 5 months. We're a little bit more than 5 months of operations, not quite 6 months of operations. We think with this latest movement to institutional reserve from the board.
Now, is that, when you say it's 5 months, is it 5 months of what they call revenue from property taxes and the state allocation, or is it all? Does it match like dollar for dollar every revenue it would take to operate for those 5 months?
On average, I mean, you take our budget. Our budget's a little bit over $40 million annually right now for this current year. If you divided that number at $40 million by 12 and then multiplied it by 5, it is the equivalent money of about.
So this is regardless of what that revenue source would be.
So like if your revenue, this is if for some reason, say there was a bank, say the whole banking system got hacked, but yet we were still able to obtain our money that's in the bank, then we would be able to still operate and use that money to run for 5 months until, then they could get the revenue flowing again, hopefully.
So, tell me about yourself and kind of how you got to this position and how did you get into higher education? Because I know you're a CPA and that's a very valuable skill out there right now. So how did you go from, you were in private sector first, right? And then
a little
morphed
bit
into higher education.
Yeah, I was, I started with one of the big, I don't know if they were called Big 8 or Big 6 accounting firms. I think it was Big 8 accounting firms.
It changes every year. There's Big 4, Big 5, Big 6.
It's fewer then because we said Arthur Anderson's gone. So I started with Coopers and Libran I went to Lamar University, and I graduated with an accounting degree, and pretty much it seemed to be the way of most of the accountants as we were recruited. Accounting degreed students were recruited by the Big 8 accounting firms. So I know a lot of us got job offers. And it seemed like from my graduating class, there was like 2 of us that went to each one of the firms. So I went to Coopers and Libran. I also had an offer from Price Waterhouse. Price Waterhouse is kind of known for...
Well, now that's PricewaterhouseCoopers, correct?
Right, yeah. So if I'd gone with Price Waterhouse, and I stayed with them, and it would have been with them eventually. But Price Waterhouse then was known as the one that does the counting of the awards for the Academy Awards, and so I was there for only 6 months, and I tell my age, but it was in 1986. Houston basically had its financial crisis with the oil bust. Yeah. And so, which was, when I think back to those times, that is really the worst time I've seen in my career of people needing jobs, because I remember being in Houston. I lived in Houston. I remember being in my apartment. It would be lunchtime. I'd be watching Channel 11 news. Channel 11 would let unemployed people on to the TV and talk for 30 seconds and give their 30-second resume, and they would do that at commercial breaks. And I thought, wow, this is really sad how bad this is. Also remember there's a really nice restaurant there in Houston called Le Colombe d'Or, and they would sell lunch for whatever the price of oil was that day, and they would price it that way. So I was unemployed for a little while, but I went on. I had to come back home down here into Galveston County, and I worked at St. Mary's Hospital, which at that time was the longest consecutive running private hospital in the state of Texas, and it survived until 1996. I worked there for 3 years, and then I got into the community college world. When I was going to school, before I went to Lamar, my first year I went to College of the Mainland. So when I was at College of the Mainland, I worked in the bookstore. My manager of the bookstore had just moved into the business office at that time when I worked there, so I was familiar with him. So I was able to go back and work for him as an accountant in the business office. So really, I took the long road. I think I was not I guess an ambitious person, and I did not was not really concerned about my career growing. So I was.
Did you care more about what you were doing as
Yeah,
opposed to?
I enjoyed
kind of rising up in the ranks of these bigger firms.
Yeah. I took the slow road, and so I was there 14 years. So I was 18 years into my career before I came here to ACC. So I was an accountant the whole time I was there, and I felt like I had an opportunity here. I knew somebody over here that kept trying to kind of recruit me over here. So I came over and I've been here almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years this September. I started as an assistant director here in the business office, which at that time was a brand new position. And they hired my boss at the same time. She started 1 week before me, and she was from Enron. So we went on from 3 years in that position to 6 years as controller to now I've been here 10 years in this position as CFO.
Right.
So. I don't regret the way I did it because
you have a varied experience that I know gets really valuable for us
what's really what you realize when you hear about people with a lot of years of experience that because you've been through so many things or you've been through just the history of things, especially with community colleges or just anywhere if you're working, that when you start to see something on the horizon, you say, oh, wait a second, just to let y'all know, this is kind of what happened back in this year. And I happen to have a very chronological mind and memory for some things like that. I think it does come out helpful that it kind of keeps people from panicking of this. Don't worry, this we can make it through this, or
kind of knowing your options in those types of situations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So tell me, we had the bond that passed here about 3-4 years ago.
2018.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I know your department was very instrumental in having to handle all of the contractors and making sure, because it was $25 million and you have to measure to the penny what it's being spent on, because there's all kinds of laws involving how you can spend bond money.
Yeah.
And so, are you kind of relieved now that it's finally kind of approaching its end or no?
Yeah. And, I never really want to go through another construction project again like that because I was just talking with our construction manager yesterday, and I was telling him, I said, man, construction business is, to me, from my perspective, very miserable. It's very miserable because there's never anybody 100% satisfied at the end of the project, because you can always find something wrong because you're dealing with a large set of buildings, But yet, if you look at it from the other perspective of, how much you did get right and how much improved things are, just a large part of what we had to do with this, $25 million that we borrowed, plus we kicked in $3 million of our own college money. So there's really a $28 million project. There's about a little over, maybe it's about 1.3 million of that dollars still left, and we'll do some finish up projects here coming up in the next year. But you realize how improved the college is. Biggest part of what we were doing with this last bond was fixing up the air conditioning system. So a lot of electrical work as well. But some of the things we can do with our air conditioning system now, there's no way we ever could have done that before. And I'm quite certain that, and it was really good at the right time. We needed a system that'll help introduce fresh air into the buildings, literally fresh air.
Yeah.
And which came at just the right time when COVID's coming around. So it worked well for us.
Thank you for coming to talk to me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you there, John.
Thank you for listening. To read about these stories and more, visit alvincollege.edu.